Hi guys, it's Hillary. Back today with another reaction to House of the Dragon Season 1. Today we are going to be watching Season 1, Episode 4, King of the Narrow Sea. So let's just get into it.
The walls, Blackhaven, are unscalable battle stones. The view across the marches is inspiring. So said Queen Alizane herself when she honored my father and I.
And tell me, Lord Dondarrion, did you think my great-grandmother as beautiful as they say?
This was half a century ago, Princess.
Yes, it was.
That was unseemly, Princess.
The man is older than my father. It's unseemly for him to put himself forward as a contender for my hand.
Honestly, kind of facts.
And now a child.
Protection? The princess has a dragon, you...
Dragon!
I'm gonna like that one.
But you're not gonna though, because he's gonna be gone in 2 seconds.
Go to supper.
Add it to the chair.
The drama.
You also
That is the ugliest effing crown I've ever seen.
Once we smash the triarch.
I love that they're hugging as if Daemon didn't like completely lose his crap at the idea of his brother helping him last episode.
The realm owes you a great debt, brother.
Perhaps Prince Daemon would care for a tour of the gallery. He hasn't yet seen the new tapestries gifted to you by Norvis and Quahor.
Would you like to see the tapestry?
Rude.
He has no interest in such things.
I'd like to see them.
Oh, well, then you should not deprive yourself.
I shall enjoy them alone.
Interesting costume design for Alicent, very Targaryen coded.
Did it as long as I could.
So? What do you want?
Only the comforts of home.
Though I do suppose you seem changed by your adventures.
Mature, perhaps.
Doubt it.
You've matured yourself these last 4 years,
Oof.
Princess.
No. Shush.
You'll get
My father seems content to sell me off to whichever lord has the biggest castle.
no worse things to be sold for.
This is clearly a rebuke for passing over Lady Lena for Queen Alicent.
The sea snake is an overproud man, to be sure, Your Grace. That pride has been injured.
Lord Corlys is said to have engaged in negotiations with the Sea Lord of Bravos. He plans, if House Velaryon entered into an alliance with the... then we would have to seek our own marriage pact.
It's almost like the Hightowers weren't the problem. The problem was a failure to actually manage the political situation on all ends. I wonder if this is going to come into play in the future at some point. God, imagine hating on a girl who spent her entire youth tending to this rotting corpse of a man. Ugh.
Though Aegon the Babe Prince might long for acclaim, he has two things.
Their wants are of no consequence.
They're of great consequence if you expect to rule them.
Not what you want to hear.
For one night, I wish to be free of the burdens of my inheritance.
Targaryen family traditions are not it. I hate it. I'm not here for it. I'm not a fan.
Damon?
Like he couldn't be worse.
I shall alert the Lord Commander.
I'm surprised that the reading of this scene was so all over the place, because it seems pretty straightforward to me. Especially juxtaposed with Alicent and Viserys beforehand, and with Daemon and Rhaenyra. The idea that this isn't coercive to me, like, I just don't really get it. I think maybe just because, like, people are so used to scenes like this in Game of Thrones being, like, extra super violent and aggressive, that maybe some casual viewers felt like it was supposed to be not that. But I thought that the point behind it seemed pretty clear. I think Fabian's acting and body language here is really good too. Definitely seems to make Sir Criston's thoughts and feelings clear, even though he doesn't have any dialogue. Also, again, very interesting building blocks towards Alicent and Criston's connection relationship, the way that they sort of play similar roles to the Targaryens, who exercise a lot of control over them. Also, again, within the context of, like, what Daemon said about the Targaryens taking what they want and doing what they want, I feel like the motivations behind this scene are pretty clear.
You can pay for the room on your way out.
Daemon's foundation does not look like the right shade match.
Come.
That was a really interesting cue right before he opened the door, him, like, taking that intense breath. That at least makes it seem like, you know, he's not looking forward to telling Viserys about Rhaenyra. Which on some level at least indicates, you know, that he's not necessarily playing this situation to his own advantage, like a lot of people might expect that he would.
Easy thing to tell a father of his daughter.
Do you wish to have your blood on the Iron Throne so badly that you are willing to destroy mine own?
Your other kids are also your blood, fool.
Leave me.
Also interesting and, like, pretty cunning political moving with Daemon. I don't know if this was entirely his intention, but it seems like this is a pretty obvious outcome of Daemon being conspicuously spotted with Rhaenyra in King's Landing. So I wonder if he actually did kind of do this at least partially to undermine Otto's position with Viserys. Also, I think it's kind of interesting, like, a lot of Rhaenyra's costumes are kind of pretty distinctly, like, non-Targaryen.
What happened last night?
Not a lot of red and black, or, like, with her sleeves here, there's just, like, a slight hint of Targaryen colors. But otherwise, it's just kind of
Were you with your uncle?
nondescript.
Must I truly refute that? I swear this to you, upon the memory of my mother.
Don't want to do that, girl. Ugh.
It was foolish of you to place yourself in a position where your virtue could even come into question.
You are the dragon. Your word is truth and law.
I have spent a lifetime.
Not really.
You, but your heart.
That didn't stop Aegon the Conqueror from taking a second wife.
You are no conqueror.
Yeah, delusions of grandeur on that one.
Sent to destroy me.
Give me Rhaenyra to take to wife.
He's not wrong, David. It was definitely a plague sent to destroy him.
Whatever transpired, Rhaenyra is not innocent.
Only because Daemon tried to corrupt her.
Alicent is too pure and too sweet for this world.
They are restless and chaotic.
She swore to me that she remains a maiden.
He wants Aegon to be named heir. And he will stop at nothing to see it done. Including spying on me.
Which, like, honestly, so not true. If he had been as, like, slick as the sea snake was, he would have just off Rhaenyra or something.
But how can that be accomplished with your most trusted advisor so self-interested?
Every lord and lady that calls for an audience with me. You went from being another man in Jaehaerys court to the second most powerful man in the realm. I wonder.
Isn't that what happens to everyone who becomes Hand or becomes a member of the Small Council?
But Alicent, she took me through the worst of my grief.
And look at how you repaid her, scrub.
Calculated distraction.
I wonder what would have been like if there's a way that he could have avoided being fired, like, because obviously Viserys believes what Otto told him, so what was the expectation there, or like what did he want out of his hand, to just pretend it didn't happen, or like to bring it to him in a different way? Kind of an interesting
If not brewed properly, it can either prove
an interesting thought experiment. An interesting insight into Rhaenyra and Viserys' relationship too, since obviously, she sort of makes a show of trying to convince him that she didn't do anything wrong, and he pretends to believe her, but then he ultimately gives her moon tea to prevent pregnancy, so obviously he ultimately didn't trust what she was saying. Okay, so that is Season 1, Episode 4, The King of the Narrow Sea. I think they certainly covered a lot of ground in this episode, starting off with Rhaenyra on her little, tour looking for a husband, which she is clearly not into. But I thought there was an interesting follow-up to that in her conversation with Daemon after he came back to King's Landing, and she explained pretty straightforwardly that she doesn't like being in the situation that she's in because she's afraid to get married and be forced to have heirs and ultimately end up the same way that her mother did, which is a valid fear. And I think that's a really interesting foundation block for her characterization going forward. Daemon's return to King's Landing, low-key hilarious, again, given that he makes such a show of bending the knee to his brother when he completely lost it at the idea of his brother helping him when he was in the Stepstones in the episode prior. And I thought it was nice to kind of see Rhaenyra and Alicent come back together and actually act like real friends, even though that obviously didn't last for a very long time. I think it's interesting to see that Rhaenyra maybe has a little bit more empathy for Alicent's situation and understands that she's not like the person who was in control of becoming the queen. But then to obviously see that reconnection break again, because ultimately Rhaenyra winds up lying to Alicent about her, she didn't technically lie, given that she didn't ultimately actually sleep with Daemon, but she sort of, twisted the truth to imply something to Alicent that wasn't necessarily entirely factual. So yeah, seeing them reconnect and then seeing Rhaenyra then just straight up lie to Alicent and to use her situation and Alicent's honesty with her as a tool to get rid of Otto and sort of leave Alicent really exposed and alone in King's Landing. That was definitely an interesting little twist. And yeah, at this point, obviously, I'm not that surprised when people dislike Alicent as a character. Obviously, that's the more popular point of view about her and her character arc. But I thought obviously that this episode made her seem extremely sympathetic. Her love scene with Viserys was definitely repulsive and demonstrated, how trapped and used she really is. But the fact that she goes directly to Rhaenyra and takes her at her word and goes to bat for Rhaenyra with Viserys showed a certain level of naivety that I feel like it's very hard to not be sympathetic to that, at least at this point in the story. Obviously, there was the super creep incident with Daemon and Rhaenyra, but I think that obviously Daemon and Rhaenyra's attitudes about the rest of the world were pretty telling, and certainly lay a lot of groundwork for what they're going to do in the future. The whole idea that, they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, with whoever they want, is certainly on brand for House Targaryen, but also shows why they run into so many problems before and after the start of the series. Definitely felt very bad for Sir Criston. I wonder if or how much the perception of his love scene with Rhaenyra would have changed if they actually built him up as a character more before this whole scene happens, because we don't really get to know him as a person until after he and Rhaenyra become romantically involved. But either way, I thought Fabian did a really good job of playing the different sides of Sir Criston's emotions when Rhaenyra is putting the moves on him. I thought that his reactions translated really well, which also made me a little surprised that so many people were maybe reading that scene as a truly romantic scene rather than a coercive scene. I thought it was a little interesting that they included the reference to the Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, that's always a fun little Easter egg for people who have read the books and who are fans of Game of Thrones, obviously. But I'm not sure. I don't know. It feels maybe a little shoehorned in there. I thought that Rhaenyra's conversation with Viserys about how she would be able to do all these things that she wanted if she had been born a man, and Viserys saying, "But you're a woman," was definitely an interesting insight into both of their perspectives as people. Again, I feel like that is a very good hint as to where Rhaenyra's mentality is at and will continue to be at going forward. Oh yeah, and obviously that play that Daemon and Rhaenyra saw, I thought that was actually a little interesting in the sense that that it kind of treated it as if Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Aegon were on equal footing when they're really not, at least like in terms of Westerosi cultural standards. Like Daemon and Rhaenyra would never have a leg to stand on against someone with a claim on the level of Aegon's claim. Obviously, the fact that Viserys has directly proclaimed Rhaenyra as his heir makes that slightly different, but it's not quite as even as I thought that scene made it out to be. Again, also with the confrontation between Daemon and Viserys, I thought it was very interesting that Daemon said that whatever the king says is truth or is law, which again seems to be a pretty obvious misunderstanding of the way that Westerosi culture tends to function. And it explains how the Greens and the Blacks ultimately came into conflict with one another. For some reason, at the end, when Viserys was confronting Otto, when he brought up his dad and his dad suddenly dying, for some reason I read that as like him accusing Otto of having Balon killed so he could become the Hand. I know that's not what he was actually trying to imply, but the structure of that dialogue there and like the way the scene was blocked and edited and everything made me feel like it was leading in that direction. And I thought it was interesting that Otto said that Alicent really loved Viserys, which we kind of do see at some points, even though I feel like it's kind of like a Stockholm syndrome-y love. But the fact that this seems to be like the first time that it occurred to Viserys that maybe a teenage girl wasn't interested in his like ancient rotting corpse of a body is kind of low-key hilarious and shows like how delusionally hopeful he is about himself and his entire situation. And yeah, ending the episode on Rhaenyra getting the moon tea to prevent pregnancy obviously was a very telling moment, and is also kind of interesting in the sense that ultimately she decides to have a ton of illegitimate children anyway. And Viserys and the rest of the lords and politicians in Westeros try to pretend that they're legitimate, at least while Viserys is still alive, because they're following his lead. But yeah, so I think that is a wrap on that episode. I'm excited to get into or get closer to the second half of the season, because I definitely enjoyed that the most. So yeah, if you're interested in watching along with me, I will be covering the rest of the episodes of Season 1 and obviously reacting and reviewing Season 2 of House of the Dragon. So if you like content like this, like, subscribe, and I hope to see you next episode.